Well, hello, my friends. This is a rather large book here. It's called The Martyr's Mirror. It's kind of similar to Fox's Book of Martyrs. And what's really interesting is that it covers persecution that Christians have had in Europe that led to the Thanksgiving story you've never heard. Because the devil hates the truth and he hates Christianity, and Satan has worked overtime to change the narrative of who America is, what America is, and how God has shaped this country. But since we watched really a miracle of intervention in this last election, I caution you to consider our work's just beginning to save the nation from its own self-destruction. So, let's start by understanding our own history. The true story of Thanksgiving that you didn't hear in school. In the real story, as opposed to when I was taught that Indians had saved the Pilgrims' lives, the fact of the matter is that a group of separatists, Christians, were tired of the harassment and persecution of James I, King James. There was an official religion established by the government, which is why the colonies were very interested in every state having its own official religion, but that the central government would not establish a religion for the nation. Because the Pilgrims came here because they were trying to get away from persecution from centralized government having a religion. And so the group that broke away from that church that was the Church of England under King James, first official Church of England, the group of separatists fled to Holland. And then in Holland, they were there for about 11 years. And about 40 of them agreed that they were going to make a journey to the New World, and that they would face those hardships and risks together. And so they ended up attracting some investors who would underwrite the trip in exchange for making money, almost like, they risked their money like a stock market, but they invested in 102 passengers that were going to take off, come to the New World, to establish a new enterprise zone, return their money back with profits, open up trade, hopefully. And these guys were led by a Christian named William Bradford. Bradford was a real praying guy, the real deal. And he wanted to establish a contract or a covenant or an agreement with all the people that were the Pilgrims, that were the original people on the ship. And they kind of agreed that they would do it like the Book of Acts. They'd have everything in common. It seemed like a good biblical principle. One for all and all for one. They'd have one common purse. They would have common wealth. And that some people would, be productive. Other people wouldn't be that productive. But they'd all put their resources into one common bin. And they would learn how to survive from that. And when they arrived at the worst possible time. They arrived in November. Imagine November in New England on the rocky shores. Well, Bradford buried his wife. The diseases that hit, the freezing cold weather, it was desolate, barren. There wasn't really, the Indians weren't there to receive them. They didn't have huts to live in. There were no inns where they could refresh themselves. And so they survived that winter. Many had died of sickness. As I said, Bradford had to bury his own wife from overexposure. But when the spring came, the Indians taught them how to plant corn and how to fish and how to skin beavers and animals that were abundant in the area and create beavers for coats and stuff like that. So the Indians helped them and taught them how to plant that corn. So when the time came for them to have a community that was operational, this is really important you know this. Their first year failed. And what they found was that having a Marxist or a socialist system didn't work. The young men didn't want to work extra and labor for people that they thought were too lazy to work, and there was no incentive for labor. And so they really had an inadequate productivity in their first year as a commonwealth. Nobody owned anything. They just had common access to the storage that was in the middle of the village. So Bradford, who became now not only the leader, but now the governor of the colony, recognized that that form of communistic, socialistic collectivism lacked something. And so he said, we're going to try something different. And he prayed about it. And he said, look, here's what we're going to do. Everyone is going to have a plot of land. And everyone can be as industrious as they want to be to develop the land that they have, so that you can literally keep what you create. You can trade off the surplus of what you create. And then they figured out how to take care of some of the weaker members of the community. And basically they established what we call free enterprise. Now this year, when they had their free enterprise, they had surplus. And when they had surplus, they actually had trade with the Indians. And the Indians were trading back and forth. Now commerce was created. And out of the commerce, the word got back into Europe. The debts were getting paid off. And a ton of people were taking off in order to become part of that new experiment, that new community. And they went from a place where they were a commune, where nobody owned anything and everybody shared in common, to a place where they recognized the individual reward and incentive for labor. They literally created the first Christian free enterprise experiment, where the land wasn't owned by a monarch and people were free to worship God with their conscience the way they wanted to. Think of these distinctions that made the American experiment different than anything in Europe. Every family had its own plot of land. They were permitted to market their products, the crops they grew. They traded. They produced more than they needed. They paid off their debts. And they established the holiday of Thanksgiving. And I think it's important for us to recognize this, that Thanksgiving is explained in a lot of our textbooks as a holiday for which pilgrims gave thanks to the Indians for saving their lives. That's the revisionist history. The truth is, their Thanksgiving was, quote, a devout expression of gratitude to God, unquote. And if you doubt that, you have to go look at George Washington's first Thanksgiving proclamation, because he made Thanksgiving a national holiday because he was recognizing thanksgiving to God for the experiment of helping believers survive in this new place and create a lifestyle where they could flourish. The original contract the Pilgrims entered in the Mayflower with their merchant sponsors was a Christian legal agreement that they were going to pay back their debts, and they did exactly that. And so I want you to think about that in a very real sense, Thanksgiving is the story of people wanting freedom of conscience to worship God. It's the story of risking and the cost of a new thing. It's the story of overcoming the death in that price and learning from others, as the Indians taught, how to survive. And then it's socialism failing and free enterprise succeeding. And they were willing to do socialism because in America you got a bunch of people that want redistribution of wealth, and they want to tax and kill the incentive of people coming to this world, this new world, to create a new life. And they want to take from the productive in order to distribute to the non-productive, rather than creating a system that incentivizes the non-productive to learn the skills and the opportunities to become resourceful. Trust me, the battle with socialism and the battle of religion are both fought on the same plane. Because Satan wants to take from God's people, and God wants to create. Remember this in Deuteronomy. God gives you the power to create wealth, and the wealth is there to be created. And we'll talk about the Indians, which is another story of great interest, and how the Indians worked with the colonies, and how as the American settlers came, Washington had the challenge of trying to negotiate with Indians who themselves were tribally divided, and his labors are trying to create some kind of a workable solution. But for now, just know that Thanksgiving is the celebration of a group of Christians seeking freedom in the 17th century, in 1600s, and that they risked it all in order to come to this place. That's the foundation of the European migration. And that socialism was the failed experiment when they got here, and that communism, as much as it worked good in the book of Acts for a short period of time, it doesn't make a sustainable system for motivating people to utilize their talents and their resources in the most creative and prosperous way. So, I want to thank you very much for this little Thanksgiving sharing. And people say, what's going on? It's always freezing. Some of you have different bandwidth on your phones and your devices. And if you don't have enough bandwidth, well, then it's going to freeze, and others don't have that problem. But God bless you, and I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for America. Thankful for the journey that believers had. And like I said, I got books like this. This isn't Fox's Book of Martyrs. This is another book, which is The Martyr's Mirror. When you think of how Satan has, through the ages, persecuted and hunted and hated Christians, and the crazy stuff that unsaved people have done, thinking that they were ridding the world of a pestilence, when in fact they were persecuting God's own people. And when you think of what religious people have done, it's shocking, isn't it? How cruel religion can be without a revelation of Christ. But as we humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, know this, that God will exalt you in due time. And it's the due time. Sometimes you have to endure for a season so that you can see the exaltation. And I believe that America is having a great Thanksgiving time now in the spirit, a very special one. And we continue to pray for Kim Clement's family, and I'm talking to some of his kids today. And I believe that there's a grace upon that family, and there's a grace upon the legacy and the work of what Kim did and what he's going to continue to do. The Bible talks about Elijah and how in the spirit those that are dead are yet speaking. And I think that there are works that Kim has done that are going to continue on, and many of us that were touched and imparted to by his mantle, we're going to discover what the Lord's called us to do that will continue on the work that he began. And I look forward to staying in touch with you guys. God bless you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.